Hey, what is up, mortals? Welcome to part 3 season 1 of What If Deku Was a Viltrumite. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. So, we begin. Class 1 did as their teacher had told them and gathered in the training field. They didn't know what was going to happen, but they could tell that Aizawa wasn't messing around. The sleep-deprived teacher scanned every single one of his students. Until he spoke, we are going to have a physical test, like the ones you had in middle school. The only difference now is that you'll be able to use your quirks, he said, sounding just as tired as he looked. The class was surprised to hear this, as Aizawa proceeded by saying, Midoriya, you got first place in the entrance exam. What was your farthest distance throw with a softball in junior high? With the same tired voice as before, Izuku thought for a second and was going to answer Aizawa. But something stopped him. It was Aizawa's eyes. He could see something strange in them. It was as if the teacher was carefully analyzing him. The look he gave showed that he was curious, as if he wanted to know just how strong Izuku was. So what is it? Aizawa then said, knocking Izuku out of his thoughts. The green-haired boy gathered himself, before answering by saying, about 60 meters. I think, sounding as calm as he could. Aizawa was unamused by this, as he tossed a softball over to Izuku and said, try doing it with your quirk this time. Anything goes, as long as you stay within that circle. As he pointed towards a circle on the ground, the other students talked among themselves, placing bets on what would happen. As Izuku walked up to the circle, the ones who were the most curious were both Ida and Uraraka. From what they saw Izuku do during the entrance exam, they knew that he was strong. But they didn't know how strong. They saw him fly, move at great speeds, show great strength and durability. But he didn't show that much during the exam. This was an opportunity to see what he could do. What does that quirkless loser think he can accomplish? Bakugo scoffed, not believing for a second that Izuku actually robbed him of the number 1 spot in the entrance exam. Ida heard the blonde and was about to speak against him, but he was beaten to it by Uraraka. What are you talking about? Midoriya isn't quirkless, the brown-haired girl said, sounding confused as to what Bakugo meant. The blonde narrowed his eyes at Uraraka, as he said, I've had the displeasure of knowing that nerd for most of my life now, and he has been quirkless during that entire time. With a more aggressive tone, Uraraka jumped a little upon hearing this, for it sounded like Bakugo was ready to attack. But his words intrigued both her and Ida. Had Izuku really been quirkless like Bakugo said? Was he just lying? Or could it have been that the green-haired boy had kept his quirk hidden up until now? Izuku stood in the ring and prepared himself, thinking on how to go about this. That is when he reeled back, before throwing the ball. A bang could be heard as the ball flew through the skies, tearing through the wind as it did. The green-haired boy had applied the same theory about punching that he had learned from his father. He used his entire body, and even used his flight to apply more power. A few seconds passed, until Aizawa finally got a notification on his phone. The tired teacher looked as unamused as always. Before showing it to the class, everyone had their jaws hit the floor, as Uraraka exclaimed, 970 meters, sounded very shocked. No way, he was just shy of 1,000 meters. Ida then exclaimed, sounding equally shocked. Aizawa had no reaction to this, but there was one thing that piqued his interest. He had used erasure on the green-haired boy, but nothing had happened. He didn't even get the usual effect when using it on mutation types. This was a strange phenomenon, and it meant one out of two things. Either Izuku was immune to erasure, or his powers didn't come from a quirk. Deku, you bastard. Tell me how you did that or else you're dead. A loud and very angry voice bellowed. It was none other than Bakugo. As he charged in towards the green-haired boy, Aizawa moved and began to ready his scarf. But he wasn't fast enough. Bakugo made it to Izuku and blasted him. A massive cloud of smoke covered the circle, so that no one could see who was standing there. Everyone got worried, thinking that Izuku had gotten hurt. But that worry was quickly replaced by shock when the smoke cleared. The green-haired boy wasn't there anymore. They couldn't see him anywhere. In fact, that was close. A voice then said. Everyone was shocked, as they followed the voice to its source. It was Izuku, and he had somehow managed to fly a few meters up in the sky before Bakugo's explosion landed. I'd rather not destroy my PE uniform on the first day, so could please not do that, Kaken, the green-haired boy then said, almost a little comically. Bakugo was in disbelief. He had seen Izuku's softball throw, but he still convinced himself that it was a trick of some sorts. This, however, could not be explained by some trick. The green-haired boy was actually floating in the air. You can't do that without a quirk, Bakugo. If you value your place here in the hero course, I strongly suggest that you stand down. Aizawa then said, Quite menacingly, Bakugo was knocked out of his shock. As he grunted and walked back to his classmates, Izuku then descended to the ground, next to his classmates. As Aizawa spoke again, these tests are meant to measure your potential. Therefore, whoever comes in last place has none and will be expelled immediately, the tired teacher said, quite bluntly. The students all went wild upon hearing this. As Uraraka spoke up, you can't expel us. We just got here, and it's not fair, she said. Aizawa got a little annoyed upon hearing this. As he said, you're right, it's not fair. But neither is the world. Nothing about this line of duty or life is fair. It's a hero's job to combat that unfairness and go beyond their normal limits. So if you don't want to be expelled, you just have to make sure to not be in last place. With a voice that showed his annoyance, the tests went on smoothly. With the class giving it their all, Izuku used his strength, speed, and flight to ace almost every test in a way that made it look like it was without any effort. In the end, Izuku placed first, with a boy named Minoru Minda ending up in last place. The boy almost began to cry due to his loss. But that was when Aizawa said, by the way, nobody is getting expelled. It was just a logical ruse to make you give it your all. But it turns out that it wasn't as effective as I had hoped. With his usual tired voice, the students were about to comment about how their teacher had lied to them, but stopped when they heard the other part of his statement. Aizawa was silent for a long while, until his gaze landed on Izuku. Midoriya, if you don't take the test seriously next time, I will expel you regardless of how good your results were, the tired teacher then said, once again sounding like he was annoyed. The class was stunned upon hearing this. Izuku had performed the best out of all of them, without a doubt, but he's been holding back while doing it. Just how strong is he? And how did he get so far? The students wanted to berate Izuku with questions, but they didn't get to do so before Aizawa told them that the class had been dismissed. The students then left the ground after this was announced. Izuku met up with both Ida and Uraraka, and they proceeded to walk to the station together. Hey, Midoriya, why does Bakugo call you Deku? Uraraka asked as they were walking. Izuku was surprised to hear this question, but he answered by saying, Kaken just calls me that to make fun of me. It's his way of calling me useless. With a calm voice, Ida then spoke about how Bakugo's attitude wasn't very hero-like. Before Uraraka said, well, I like Deku. It would make a great hero name. Besides, I don't think that you're useless. With a joyous tone, Izuku was not ready to hear any of this, so his face suddenly turned as red as a tomato. The next day was pretty uneventful. It consisted mostly of regular classes, and the students started to get used to the school. Eventually, the final and most anticipated class arrived. It was hero training, which was appropriately announced when a loud and booming voice shouted, I am here. The students all turned to see that it was none other than All Might, entering through the door in a spectacular way. The class got excited as the blonde hero started to speak. All right, class. It's time for the most important class in the hero course. You could even call it Heroing 101. And today we'll be doing battle training, All Might said, sounding as proud as he usually did. The class began to cheer in even more excitement upon hearing this, as All Might pulled out a red button before saying, but first, there's another important part about being a hero, and that is looking good. With the same booming voice, All Might then pushed the button, which made the classroom wall open. Behind it were 20 suitcases, all containing the students' hero costumes. The class got even more excited as they got up and grabbed their respective suitcases before heading out. It didn't take long for the students to get changed and meet All Might at ground beta. Everyone was wearing their hero costumes and proceeded to compliment each other about it. Izuku's costume consisted of a green jacket with long white gloves and a green hood with ear-like protrusions. This costume was custom made by a tailor that was good friends with his father. It was designed to handle extreme situations, such as entering and leaving the atmosphere. And Izuku's father had commented about how much it was inspired by All Might a little too much. The students' chatter then quieted down as All Might proceeded to explain the exercise. There would be 2 teams, one hero team and one villain team. The villain's job is to protect a weapon, while the heroes are supposed to capture it. The heroes win if they secure the weapon or capture the villains. The villains win if they capture the heroes or protect the weapon until time runs out. After the exercise was fully explained, the teams were made and drawn. The first round had Izuku and Uraraka as the heroes, against Bakugo and Ida as the villains. All Might smiled even more upon seeing this matchup, for he knew that it would be a good one before he sent both teams on their way. The villains were given time to prepare before the exercise started. During that time, Izuku and Uraraka were outside. They were both studying the layout of the building, until Uraraka spoke up. So, Bakugo told us that you have known each other for a while. But what exactly is your relationship? The brown-haired girl asked. Izuku was surprised to hear this, but he gathered himself as he answered. We're childhood friends, but then he started bullying me. I was quirkless until just 10 months ago. And Kaken probably thinks that I have been hiding my quirk from him all this time. With a relatively calm voice, Uraraka was surprised to hear this answer. But now she understood what Bakugo had said earlier. The blonde thought that Izuku was quirkless, but he just hadn't seen him use his quirk during the last 10 months. I see. So it's a fated encounter between rivals, Uraraka then commented. Only now realizing how big this battle was, Izuku didn't react to this, however, as he responded to her comment by saying, yeah, but I won't give him the fight that he seeks. I don't care how angry he is, nor do I care how much he wants this. I refuse to face him. I won't do it for one simple reason. I don't know how to fight him without seriously injuring him. With a slightly aggressive tone, Uraraka did not expect this kind of response. It wasn't just Izuku's tone. It was what he said. It made sense that he would want to avoid hurting Bakugo, considering that he probably doesn't have a lot of control either. But the way that the green-haired boy spoke made it seem like he wasn't worried, like he knew that Bakugo couldn't win against him. Uraraka knew that Izuku was strong. His results in the quirk test coupled with Aizawa's comment at the end was enough proof of that. But right now she couldn't tell whether he was overly confident or not. I'm sorry for dragging you into this mess, the green-haired boy then said, scratching the back of his head as he did. Uraraka gathered herself once more, as she answered by saying, it's all right. We're a team after all. Quite joyfully, Izuku blushed slightly upon hearing this, but he gathered himself once All Might announced that the heroes could now enter the building. So, what's the plan? Uraraka then asked. Izuku looked up at the building, as he answered, follow me, before slowly flying upwards. Uraraka looked confused at first, but she didn't question it as she made herself float alongside Izuku. The two slowly made their way up alongside the building, until they stopped at a window. Through it they could see the weapon, and they could see that Ida was guarding it by himself. Just as I thought, Kaken has gone out on his own to look for me, leaving Ida to defend the bomb on his own, Izuku commented, sounding like he had anticipated all of this. Uraraka was stunned to hear all of this, but she didn't comment as she knew what came next. The duo silently entered through one of the windows, just in time to hear Ida say, Bakugo is already quite villainous, so for now I shall embrace the true name of villainy. With a villainous voice, showing just how much he was dedicated to his role as a villain. Both Izuku and Uraraka giggled upon hearing this, which made Ida jump as he turned around. Wow. That has to be the worst villain impression I have ever heard, Izuku said, barely holding in his laughter. Ida was just shocked, as he exclaimed, what? How did you get in here? And how did you get behind me? Still maintaining his villain impression somehow, Izuku just continued to smile, as he pointed his thumb behind himself before saying, we went through the windows. Did you forget that she can float and that I can fly? With a calm and almost comical voice, Ida didn't respond to this. He just sighed in defeat. The room was now silent, until it was broken by Izuku. Now then, do you want to do this the easy way, or my way? The green-haired boy said, before he and Uraraka jumped and flew towards Ida. The armored teen wasn't willing to lose, so he picked the bomb up and dashed across the room. Izuku and Uraraka missed the bomb entirely. As Ida said, I can easily keep this bomb out of your reach until backup arrives. Heroes, sounding more villainous than ever. Izuku looked completely unamused by this, as he responded by saying, I guess we're doing this my way then. With a slightly annoyed tone, Ida was confused by this, as he asked, what is that supposed to mean? But didn't get to finish his sentence before Izuku flew across the room and hit him in the chest. The force from the impact was so great that it completely shattered Ida's chest plate, knocking the breath out of him. As it launched him into a wall, the blue-haired boy curled up on the floor, shivering in pain as he was gasping for air. Izuku shivered and felt bad upon witnessing this scene, as he said, just when I thought I had gotten over that. I'm so sorry, Ida. I know how much that hurts, sounding like he was genuinely sorry. Uraraka was frozen upon seeing this, for she now understood Izuku. The green-haired boy was serious when he said that he could hurt someone too easily. And this was enough proof. Ida had taken just one punch, and he was completely defeated. What made things worse is that Izuku clearly didn't want to hit Ada this hard, and she could somehow sense that he could do a lot worse than this. Uraraka, would you like to do the honors? Izuku then asked, as he pointed towards the bomb. The brown-haired girl was knocked out of her thoughts as she walked up and touched the bomb. Hero Team wins. All Might then shouted through the speakers, marking the end of the exercise. Izuku was quick to help Ida stand up, which prompted Uraraka to do the same before they all walked out together. After everyone had gathered in the monitor room, All Might declared that both Ida and Izuku were the MVPs. This led to Yaotorazu explaining that Ida had, unlike his teammate, taken the exercise seriously and actually tried to defend the weapon. Meanwhile, Izuku had made a plan that would involve a minimal amount of combat, which in turn would involve a minimal amount of property damage. The only forms of criticism that were given to them were that Ida needed to be more aware of his surroundings and the opponent's possibilities, and that Izuku should try to hold back more. The green-haired boy was being praised for his performance, but he couldn't bring himself to accept it. He had hurt Ida. Had it not been for the armor, he could have possibly shattered his ribcage. He needed to get better at controlling powers, so that this can never happen again. The other matches went on smoothly, with different sides winning. One match, however, caught Izuku's attention more than the others. It was one that ended within just a few seconds, when someone with dual-colored hair froze the entire building. Izuku made a mental note to keep an eye out for this ice user, for he was quite strong. The day then went on as it should have, with the students finishing whatever needed to be finished before heading home. Izuku met up with both Ida and Uraraka after everything had ended, and the green-haired boy apologized to Ida so many times that it was starting to get annoying. Shortly after they left, Bakugo walked out of the building. He watched the trio walk off, and he was getting angry. His anger was aimed at Izuku, and it was because of what happened during the exercise. The green-haired boy had avoided combat with him, and it wasn't the first time either. He had also done it when the blonde tried to attack him during the quirk test. Bakugo was getting more and more furious. Izuku had been hiding his quirk all this time, and now he was stronger than him. The blonde had more than just his explosions now, and he even had All Might on his side, yet he still couldn't see if he faced up to Izuku. The blonde clenched his fists in anger, until he felt a hand on his shoulder. Is everything all right, young Bakugo? The booming voice of All Might asked, wondering what was happening. Bakugo just grunted, as he looked towards the far-distant Izuku, before shouting, "Damn it, Deku, when did you get so damn strong?" With a very angry tone. All Might was surprised to hear this. He knew that Bakugo was talking about Izuku, and he knew why. Bakugo is obsessed with being the strongest, and seeing the green-haired boy show off his power like that had probably triggered something in him. All Might didn't see this as a bad thing, however. He only saw it as an opportunity to motivate his successor. Don't beat yourself over it, young Bakugo. Young Midoriya is really strong, the blonde hero said, his voice sounding just as proud as before. Bakugo looked confused, as All Might continued. You may have my quirk, but young Midoriya can still rival you in terms of power. The two of you actually have more things in common than you think. Bakugo was even more confused now, just as he was angry. What is that supposed to mean? All Might, the blonde growled, quite aggressively. All Might was unaffected by this, for he had gotten used to it after 10 months. As he smiled and said, let's just say that you're not the only one with a connection to a really powerful hero. His voice not changing in the slightest. Bakugo just got more confused, for he barely understood what this meant. Is Izuku also being trained by a hero? And is that hero strong enough to rival All Might? Is that why the green-haired boy had gotten so strong? He was being trained by a hero who could rival All Might. The blonde didn't have any answer to any of this, but he knew one thing for certain. Izuku had somehow gotten really strong, but wasn't going to let that nerd surpass him. Outro. Thank you all for sticking around, and I hope that you enjoyed. Before you leave, we would just like to let you know that We the Celestials has many other channels for your entertainment and viewing purposes. All the information you'll need is right below here in the description, so feel free to check out all the other incredible projects our team creates. Secondly, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. That's all for today's video. So goodbye and have a divine day.